Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez knew the exact moment she'd walked into an ambush, disguised as a town hall. It was when Kash Patel smiled. It wasn't the usual polite political smile politicians use as shields. It was the smirk of a federal prosecutor about to present evidence that would shatter a defendant's alibi. She arrived at the News Nation America Speaks town hall brimming with her usual confidence, the kind built from 3 years of fawning media coverage and millions of social media followers who treated her every tweet like scripture. She had all her talking points ready, focusing on billionaire bootlickers and late-stage capitalism. She'd even practiced her indignant face in the green room mirror. Her outfit was perfectly coordinated, too. A designer blazer over a tax the rich message tee, all for maximum Instagram engagement. Kash Patel, however, arrived with something entirely different. He carried an iPad, a stack of documents in a leather portfolio, and 15 years of experience as a federal prosecutor and national security official who'd spent his career dealing with people who believed they were smarter than everyone else. What unfolded in the next 90 minutes would become the most watched political takedown of 2024, and the last time AOC agreed to debate anyone outside her carefully curated, safe space. If you've ever wondered what happens when Instagram activism clashes with actual facts, or when viral tweets encounter verified documents, you're about to find out. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end, because what Kash pulled out in round 4 left her entire squad speechless. The stage was simply set. 2 chairs angled towards each other, a moderator's desk between them, and a live studio audience of 200 people, carefully balanced between conservatives, liberals, and the politically unaffiliated. News Nation had promoted it as the Great Debate, Populism versus Establishment. Even though the framing already annoyed both participants for different reasons, AOC sat down first, adjusting her lapel mic with the practiced ease of someone who'd done hundreds of interviews. She flashed her practiced, relatable smile at the audience, the kind that said, "I'm just like you," despite her designer clothes and congressional salary. A few people applauded. She waved. Patel walked out to even more applause. Louder, actually, which seemed to catch the producers by surprise. He sat down, placed his leather portfolio on the small table beside his chair, and nodded to the moderator with the professional courtesy honed from years in courtrooms and classified briefings. The moderator, Sarah Chen from News Nation, eyed them both with the wary expression of someone who knew this could go sideways, fast. "Welcome to both of you," she began. "We're here tonight for a substantive discussion about the future of America." "Before we start," AOC interrupted, already pivoting to attack mode, "I just want to say that I find it interesting we're even having this debate. People like Kash Patel represent everything that's wrong with America. The bootlickers for billionaires, the defenders of the 1%, the people who would rather protect corporate profits than protect working families." She was 45 seconds into her stump speech when Kash raised his hand, like a student who'd caught the teacher in a mistake. "Sorry," Patel said, his voice calm, which somehow made it even more devastating. "Can I ask a quick question before we dive into the prepared attacks?" Sarah Chen looked confused. This wasn't part of the format. "I suppose." "Great." Patel then turned to AOC. "How did you get here tonight?" AOC blinked. "Excuse me? To the studio. How did you arrive? Did you take an Uber, the subway, or walk?" "I drove," she said, her tone clearly suggesting this was a waste of time. "Why, in your Tesla, right?" Patel asked. He was already pulling out his iPad, tapping the screen. "The blue Model 3, the one that costs about $47,000. AOC's expression flickered. It was the first hint that this wasn't going according to her script. Patel held up the iPad, showing a photo to both the audience and the cameras. It was unmistakably AOC, stepping out of a Tesla in the parking structure just 20 minutes earlier. Someone on his team had been watching. "This is you arriving tonight," Patel said. "Nice car, by the way. Really nice. So, let's talk about that Tesla." "It's electric," AOC said defensively. "It's better for the environment than it's made by Tesla Inc." Patel continued as if she hadn't spoken. "CEO Elon Musk. You know him. You've tweeted about him 47 times in the last 2 years. Yes, I counted." He tapped his iPad again, and the screen behind them, meant for graphics and B-roll, suddenly displayed a compilation of AOC's tweets about Elon Musk. The audience could read them. Oligarch, union buster, billionaire, playing with humanity's future, space Karen. You've called him everything from an oligarch to a threat to democracy. "Those are really strong words," Patel noted. "Really strong. But you drive his car every single day. The profit from your purchase, let's say a Tesla, which makes about a $5,000 profit per Model 3, went straight into his pocket." The audience fell silent now, leaning forward in anticipation. This definitely wasn't what they'd expected to hear. AOC tried to regain her composure. "It's electric," she began. "It's better for climate change, which is an existential crisis." "So is the subway," Patel pointed out. He interrupted gently. "Which, by the way, runs just 2 blocks from your Navy Yard apartment. You represent the Bronx and Queens, home to some of the best public transit in America. I'm talking about the subway, the bus, and even bike lanes. All things your party pushed for. Yet you drive a $47,000 luxury car to fight for working people." Someone in the audience let out a quick, stifled laugh, but it definitely happened. "This is ridiculous," AOC exclaimed. AOC said, glancing at Sarah Chen. "We're talking about transportation when we should be discussing hypocrisy," AOC countered. "Hypocrisy, you say?" Patel suggested. "Because I think we are discussing that," he calmly stated. He leaned forward, his tone still conversational, as if he were explaining something to a colleague rather than completely destroying her on live television. "Here's what I just don't understand, Congresswoman," he continued. "You've built your entire brand on attacking billionaires, the evil 1%, and the oligarchs," Patel observed. "But you, yourself, make them richer," he pointed out. "You bought Elon Musk's car. You shop at Amazon." "Yes, I've actually seen the packages delivered to your office." "Yes," Patel confirmed. "There are photos, you know," he added casually. "And you tweet from an iPhone made by Apple, a company worth over $3 trillion? He calmly counted these points off on his fingers. "You claim to represent working people," he continued, "while living like you're firmly in that 1%. Your base salary, for example, is $174,000 a year. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners," he stressed. "That's higher than 90% of the very people you claim to represent." AOC's face was flushing now, that telltale red creeping up from her collar. "My salary is set by Congress," she defended. "You may not control it, but you certainly keep it," Patel shot back. "All of it," he emphasized, while at the same time advocating for wealth redistribution and calling for higher taxes on the rich, which by income includes you. He sat back, spreading his hands wide. "Maybe the problem isn't the billionaires, Congresswoman," he mused. "Maybe it's politicians who build careers attacking success while still enjoying all the benefits of it themselves. You're not actually against capitalism. You're just against other people succeeding at it more than you do." The silence that followed was so profound. It was the kind that makes producers nervously check their audio levels. Sarah Chen cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" she finally asked. AOC opened her mouth to speak, then slowly closed it again. "Finally," she managed. "This is a typical right-wing tactic. Distraction, personal attacks instead of," she began, before Patel mildly countered, "I quoted your tweets and cited your salary." "Which part of that exactly was personal?" he pressed. And that, everyone realized, was just round one. Just wait until you see what he pulls out about the Met Gala. Drop a comment if you're ready for this. AOC quickly tried to regain control by pivoting to her greatest hits, the moments that made her famous, the viral instances that had built her entire brand. "At least I'm not afraid to make statements about inequality," she declared, her voice taking on that passionate quality her fans absolutely loved. "While people like Kash stay silent, defending the status quo, I'm willing to take risks, to stand up, and to make people uncomfortable." She was, obviously, referring to the Met Gala. Her team had probably told her to bring it up themselves, to turn it from a controversy into a strength, to own it fully, to make it about courage, even. Patel just smiled. "Oh, honey," that smile seemed to say. "You really shouldn't have done that." "Oh, good," he chuckled. He added, "I actually wanted to talk about that." AOC's confidence visibly faltered for just a second. You could clearly see it in her eyes, the dawning realization that maybe this was, in fact, a trap. "You're talking about the Met Gala, right?" he asked directly. Patel then continued, "September 2021, the Tax the Rich dress," he specified. "Yes," AOC replied, noticeably recovering her posture. "I brought my message to millionaires eating $500 plates of food," she proudly stated. Patel finished her sentence for her. The audience made a strange sound then, not quite laughter, and not quite a gasp. It was somewhere awkwardly in between. Sarah Chen immediately tried to regain control of the room. "Let's let the Congresswoman finish her thought," she attempted. No, it's fine," Patel waved her off. Patel said, "I'm genuinely curious. Congresswoman, please tell us about the Met Gala," he invited. "Who specifically was there? And what exactly was the message?" He was clearly using a technique from his old prosecutor days. Let the defendant just talk themselves right into a corner. AOC, still not recognizing the trap, eagerly took the bait. "The Met Gala was an opportunity to bring my message to a space that's typically exclusive to the wealthy elite," she explained. "To make them uncomfortable, to force a real conversation about inequality in a place that solely celebrates excess." She was warming up now, hitting all her familiar talking points. "That's why the dress said, 'Tax the rich,'" she elaborated. "It was a powerful statement, art as activism, using fashion to really—" "How much was your ticket?" Patel suddenly asked. AOC stopped mid-sentence, caught off guard. "What?" she blurted out. "Your ticket to the Met Gala," he reiterated. "How much did it cost you?" "I was invited," she quickly said, carefully choosing her words. "I didn't pay." "Someone paid, though," Patel calmly countered. He was bringing up his iPad once more, and the large screen behind them then shifted to display the Met Gala's archived website from 2021. Individual tickets were priced at $35,000. Tables went for $270,000. He allowed that figure to resonate through the room. $35,000, he reiterated. "That's over half of your district's median household income, all for just one ticket to a single event," he stated. He tapped his iPad, and suddenly, pictures of AOC at the Met Gala popped up. showing her striking a pose on the red carpet with that "Tax the Rich" dress front and center. She appeared stunning, radiating confidence, truly embodying the revolutionary activist. "Let's discuss that particular evening," Patel continued. "September 13th, 2021, Patel specified. "While you were attending the Met Gala, here is precisely what was unfolding back in your district." The screen then transitioned, filling with stark statistics. The average household income in the Bronx was $38,000. The poverty rate stood at 28%. Food insecurity affected 1 in 4 households. Regarding rent burden, 54% of residents were dedicating over 30% of their income to rent. Your constituents were forced to choose between paying rent and buying food, Patel stated plainly. They were deciding between medicine and electricity, or between keeping their apartment and getting their car fixed, while you were at a $35,000 per plate dinner, clad in a designer dress, lecturing wealthy individuals, those dining on $500 meals, to contribute more taxes. Someone in the audience, whose political leanings were impossible to discern, uttered a quiet, "Damn." AOC attempted to push back. "I was invited. I was given access to—" "Who paid?" Patel demanded. "This is a straightforward question," he pressed. "Either you personally paid $35,000, or your campaign covered the $35,000, or someone presented you with a $35,000 gift." Patel laid out the options. "Which one was it?" he asked. "Who exactly provided the ticket?" Because if an individual gave you a $35,000 ticket, that undeniably counts as a gift. Federal employees are prohibited from accepting gifts exceeding $50 from restricted sources, he explained. "You are a federal employee, Congresswoman, so this means either you violated ethics regulations or you're simply not disclosing who footed the bill." AOC's lawyer, seated in the front row, was likely on the verge of a heart attack at that very moment. "And the dress," Patel continued, cutting her off before she could even begin to form a reply. "You claimed it was borrowed, supposedly to make a statement," he stated. "The designer behind it was Aurora James, the founder of Brother Vellies," he revealed. "She deals in high-end luxury goods, shoes that go for $500 a pair, and handbags priced at over $1,000. He then pulled up Aurora James's official website onto the screen. "She gained millions in free publicity, all thanks to that dress," he asserted. "Her business, which caters luxury items to affluent clientele, experienced a huge surge in sales. You effectively handed her the largest advertising campaign of her entire career, all while you were wearing a dress that proclaimed 'Tax the Rich.'" He then gazed at AOC with an expression that bordered on pity. "The irony is so incredibly thick, you could slice right through it," he remarked. "You donned a political statement dress that enriched a luxury goods designer, attending a party for the wealthy, funded by an anonymous donor you refused to name, all to make a point about inequality," he summarized. "I was simply trying to—" AOC began to protest. "You were attempting to go viral," Patel interjected bluntly. "And you certainly succeeded. You posted 37 separate times on Instagram that very night. I counted those as well," he added. "That's 37 meticulously curated posts of you at the Met Gala, posing, looking radiant, and ensuring every angle was perfect." The screen displayed a quick montage of her Instagram posts from that memorable night. Every single one was perfectly framed, flawlessly lit, and precisely calculated to maximize engagement. "You spent more time snapping selfies that night," Patel said quietly, his voice low, "than most of your constituents will spend eating this entire week." AOC appeared as though she had just been physically struck. Sarah Chen seemed visibly eager to summon security. "That's not genuinely fighting for working-class people, Congresswoman," Patel pressed on. Patel persisted. That's not true activism. That's not even actual politics. That is simply building your personal brand. You're not a revolutionary figure. You are an influencer who just happens to hold a vote in Congress. The very person embodying Instagram activism had just been thoroughly exposed for it. Share if you're fed up with performative politics. Sarah Chen, making a desperate effort to rein in the out-of-control debate, glanced at her notes and selected what she believed would be a much safer subject. Let's discuss Hurricane Maria relief and Puerto Rico, she suggested. She stated, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you have been quite outspoken regarding the federal government's response to AOC eagerly interjected, clearly grateful for what appeared to be more favorable territory. Thank you, she said. This is precisely what I mean when I talk about priorities. My own grandmother, my abuela, was enduring terrible conditions in the wake of Hurricane Maria. The roof of her home was severely damaged. The ceiling itself was collapsing inwards. She received no assistance from the government. No help from FEMA. Absolutely no help from anyone. Her voice was now becoming noticeably emotional. This was a well-rehearsed narrative, a story she had shared on many previous occasions. This is what transpires when we fail to invest in our infrastructure, when we neglect to prioritize people over profits, when we forsake our own citizens simply because they reside in a territory rather than a state. My abuela was living in truly perilous conditions, and her government completely failed her. She was verging on tears, her voice trembling. It was a potent moment. It was deeply moving. Yet, it was also on the brink of being utterly torn apart. Kash Patel patiently waited for her to conclude her dramatic performance. Then, he casually pulled up his iPad once more. That is, indeed, a very moving story, he commented. I remember when you tweeted about this back in June of 2021, right? Let me just pull up those tweets for everyone to see. The screen behind them then shifted, revealing AOC's Twitter thread from June 1, 2021. They showed photos of a house in Puerto Rico with peeling paint, structural damage, and visible deterioration. The accompanying text was incredibly emotional, placing blame on the Trump administration and Republicans and demanding immediate action. These were really powerful tweets, Patel noted. They truly went viral, generating millions of impressions, thousands of retweets, and were very emotional, very effective at driving your political message. He then paused, tapping his iPad. What happened next is even more intriguing. AOC's eyes narrowed a bit. She clearly knew something was about to come her way. A conservative commentator, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, saw your tweets, Patel went on to say. And do you know what he did? He didn't argue with you at all. He didn't attack you personally. He didn't even write a counter-thread. Patel looked up from his iPad. Instead, he started a GoFundMe to genuinely help your grandmother. The audience was completely silent now, obviously confused about where this story was headed. Not to make a political statement, Patel explained, not to own the libs, but to actually fix the very problem you had just cried about on Twitter. He established a GoFundMe with the specific goal of raising enough money to repair your grandmother's home. He then pulled up the GoFundMe page on the screen for everyone to see. The goal was an ambitious $50,000. Yet, they managed to raise $14,000. In just 24 hours, Patel said, conservatives, the very people you spend every day attacking, calling them fascists and bootlickers, raised $14,000 for your family member to fix the exact problem you had just tweeted about. AOC tried to interrupt at that point. That was a political stunt, she retorted. It was $14,000 in real money. Patel's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through his prosecutorial calm. To fix a real problem that you had just spent 3 tweets crying about. He took a deep breath, then visibly regained his composure. "And you refused it," he stated. "Your family refused it as well." Your team then issued a statement, claiming you didn't need any right-wing charity. Ultimately, the money was refunded to all the donors. Your grandmother never received a single penny. The audience started to make sounds now, murmurs and whispers, with someone clearly heard saying, "What?" "But the story, it doesn't end there," Patel continued, his voice steady. "Because people got curious, you see. Journalists, actual journalists, not your friends, from Vox went to Puerto Rico. They tracked down your grandmother's house. He then pulled up recent photos on the screen. The house looked essentially identical to how it appeared in AOC's tweets from 2021. So this is the house now, 3 years later, still damaged, still in poor condition. Your grandmother never received any help whatsoever. Not from the government you claimed failed her, nor from the conservatives who genuinely tried to step in. Why? Because you specifically said no." Patel then set down his iPad and looked directly at AOC, his gaze unwavering. "You used your own grandmother's suffering as a political prop," he asserted. "You posted her misery on Instagram simply for engagement. You weaponized her living conditions to attack Republicans. And when people, the very evil conservatives you demonize daily, offered to actually solve the problem, you refused. Because if that problem got solved, you couldn't tweet about it anymore, could you?" AOC's face was now bright red, and she was genuinely angry. "You don't know anything about my family," she snapped. "I know you chose viral tweets over your grandmother's roof," Patel shot back instantly. "I know $14,000 in repairs was worth less to you than being able to simply blame Republicans on Twitter." He then leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something far colder than mere anger. "This is what I truly don't understand about modern progressives. You don't actually want to solve problems. You only want to campaign on them. You need them to stay broken just so you can remain relevant. Your grandmother could have had a fixed roof, but instead you got retweets." The silence in the room was deafening. "How many retweets is your grandmother's suffering worth, Congresswoman?" he pressed. "What's the exchange rate? Because apparently it's more valuable than $14,000 in repairs from people you claim to hate." AOC genuinely looked like she might burst into tears, not the practiced emotional cry from her previous narratives, but real, genuine distress at being cornered and caught in something she couldn't spin her way out of. Sarah Chen glanced down at her notes, clearly hoping for literally any other topic to transition to. She chose tweets over her own grandmother's well-being, Patel reiterated. "Let that sink in. Comment below if this disgusts you as much as it should." Sarah Chen, scrambling to regain control of the discussion, decided to take a question from the audience. She pointed to a man in the third row who had a clear Queen's accent. "Yes, sir," she said. "You have a question?" The man stood up. "Yeah, I'm from Long Island City. I used to work in logistics. My question is for the Congresswoman. What about the Amazon jobs?" AOC's face immediately lit up. Finally, this was something she felt confident she could defend. She had spent years being praised by the left for standing up to Amazon, and this felt like her victory lap. "Thank you for that question," she said, sitting up straighter in her chair. "I'm proud that I stood up to corporate greed and actually won. Amazon was asking for billions in tax breaks, $3 billion just to bring jobs to Queens. That's cash that could have gone directly to our schools, our infrastructure, and right into our communities. We shouldn't have to bribe billionaires just to get them to come to New York. She was really getting into her rhythm now, full of passion and utterly convinced. I helped put a stop to that corporate giveaway, and honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. We can't let big corporations hold us hostage, promising jobs in exchange for our hard-earned taxpayer money. That's simply not how things should operate. A few people in the audience clapped. The guy who asked the question, though, didn't make a sound. Kash Patel then smoothly pulled a document from his sleek leather portfolio. Things were about to get really technical and pretty brutal. "Okay," he began, his tone almost too cheerful, which really should have been a warning. "Let's talk about Amazon HQ too, since you brought it up, and since you're so proud of it." He held the document up for everyone to see. "This is the actual deal," he stated. "Not your tweet, not your Instagram story. This is the real economic development agreement between Amazon, New York State, and New York City. Have you actually read it?" AOC paused for a moment. "I've been briefed on it." "But have you read it?" Patel repeated, pointing to the document. "This actual agreement?" "My staff reviewed it." "So that's a no then," Patel responded. Patel declared, "You killed this entire deal without even reading it." "All right, let me tell you exactly what was in it." He then quickly flipped to a page he had clearly marked. Amazon was going to bring 25,000 jobs to Long Island City. The agreement clearly specified an average salary of $150,000 per year. Not minimum wage, not some gig economy job, but $150,000. That's $3.75 billion in annual wages flowing right into your district. He quickly calculated it on his fingers. $375 billion every single year. And that's just direct wages, not even counting the economic multiplier effect, which economists typically estimate at 2.5 to 3 times. So realistically, we're looking at anywhere from $9 to $11 billion in annual economic impact. AOC tried to cut in, but she only managed to say, "But the tax breaks." "Let's definitely talk about those tax breaks," Patel shot back, and now there was a definite edge to his voice. "That $3 billion you're so incredibly proud of saving. Do you even understand how tax incentives actually function?" "Of course I do," she challenged, with a slight raise in her voice. "So, then explain how those $3 billion in tax incentives were supposed to work." AOC opened her mouth to speak, then simply closed it again. Sarah Chen looked utterly fascinated, almost against her own will. Patel didn't even wait for an answer, knowing full well it wasn't coming. "That $3 billion wasn't some check we were just writing to Amazon," he explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "It wasn't money just sitting in some vault that we decided to hand over to Jeff Bezos instead of our schools. That's fundamentally not how tax incentives work." He held the document up once more. "These were simply tax credits spread over 10 years, entirely performance-based. Amazon would only receive them if they actually created the jobs, actually paid the salaries, and actually generated the economic activity. They were essentially savings on taxes that Amazon would owe on income it generated simply by being here." He deliberately emphasized each word: no Amazon, no income, no taxes. You could almost visibly see the realization starting to spread throughout the audience. People who had bought into AOC's story were suddenly grasping that they might have been misled. "You didn't actually save $3 billion, Patel pressed on. "There was never any $3 billion to save in the first place. What you did was prevent the state from offering incentives on taxes that would have been generated by economic activity that, as of now, simply isn't happening. And his voice was truly rising now, pure passion breaking right through his earlier prosecutorial calm. You killed $375 billion in annual wages. You killed billions more in potential economic activity. You killed 25,000 direct jobs, along with an estimated 67,000 indirect jobs. Think suppliers, services, restaurants, retail, every small business that would have thrived serving Amazon employees. AOC tried once more to respond. We could have used that $3 billion for schools. But there was no $3 billion. Patel was almost shouting now, and the entire audience had fallen completely silent. That money simply didn't exist. You can't just spend money that you don't actually possess. This is just basic economics. This is simply math. He took a deep breath, visibly forcing himself to calm down. Let me put this in another way, he said, his voice dropping back to that unsettling quiet. You claim to have saved $3 billion in corporate giveaways. What you actually managed to do was cost your district $14 billion in tax revenue, money that would have been generated over 10 years, even after those incentives. Amazon's own economic analysis, which I have right here, projected $14 billion in net new tax revenue for both New York State and New York City. He held up yet another document. You didn't save any money at all. You actually lost money. $14 billion. You effectively cost your district the single largest economic development opportunity in its entire history, all because you fundamentally didn't understand how tax policy actually works. The man from Long Island City, the one who'd asked the initial question, was now nodding his head vigorously. Small businesses were truly counting on Amazon, Patel pressed on. Think of the bodega owner who would have sold lunches to 25,000 workers, the coffee shops, the dry cleaners, the gyms, the daycares, the restaurants. They had already started making plans, securing loans, hiring new staff, and you simply killed all their dreams. He pulled out his iPad once more, and interviews with Long Island City small business owners, filmed right after Amazon withdrew, started playing on the screen. Their faces clearly showed the story: devastation, anger, and disbelief. These are your constituents, Patel stated as the video continued. This is what your victory looked like to them. AOC gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. And you want to know the ultimate irony? Patel asked. Where did Amazon go instead? Silence. Virginia, Crystal City, which offered them a similar deal. Virginia ended up with 25,000 jobs. Virginia received the tax revenue. Virginia experienced the economic growth. And you got to feel good about yourself on Twitter. He closed his iPad, then looked at her with an expression that bordered on pity. You didn't really stand up to Amazon, Congresswoman. You didn't protect your constituents. You committed economic malpractice, all based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how tax policy actually works. 25,000 families who could have had six-figure jobs don't have them now, all because you wanted to be a hero on social media. He then turned to the audience. Is anyone else here from Queens? Anyone who could have had one of those jobs or benefited from that economic activity? 3 hands shot up, then 5, then a dozen. Patel looked back at AOC. Tell them why your Twitter ratio was more important than their employment. AOC opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She killed 25,000 jobs and called it a victory. If you know someone who could have used one of those jobs, share this. The audience was restless now, clearly energized by the confrontation. Sarah Chen glanced at her watch. They'd gone over time, But the producers were likely telling her to keep it going, as the ratings must have been through the roof. AOC tried to regain her footing with an appeal to principle. "At least I'm fighting for equity," she said, her voice strained yet defiant. "For fairness. For a system where everyone contributes their fair share. Where we redistribute wealth to those who truly need it, instead of hoarding it at the top." Kash Patel stared at her for a long moment. "Interesting," he said. "Let's talk about your wealth." You could almost see her brain working, trying to figure out if this was a trap. It was. "How much do you make as a member of Congress?" Patel asked. "That's public record," AOC replied. "I make the same as everyone else, $174,000 per year," Patel said. "Correct. Yes. And that puts you in what percentile of American earners?" AOC hesitated. "I don't know the exact top 10%, Patel stated. "You make more than 90% of Americans. By your own definition, that makes you the rich one." Someone in the audience laughed, then quickly stifled it. "Now," Patel continued, "you've advocated for a 70% marginal tax rate on high earners. You've called for wealth taxes. You've said the rich need to pay their fair share. Here's my question. Do you pay your fair share?" "I pay what I owe." "That's not what I asked," Patel interrupted. "The IRS allows for voluntary contributions above your tax obligation. There's literally a form for it. It's called Gift to the United States Government. You can pay as much as you want. Have you ever used it?" Silence. "Let me rephrase." Patel said, "You want to force other people to pay more in taxes. Have you ever voluntarily paid more yourself?" "The system needs to change for everyone," AOC said. "Individual actions don't." "So that's a no?" Patel said. "You want to mandate that others pay more, but you won't voluntarily do it yourself. You want forced charity, not voluntary charity." He pulled up his iPad again. "Let's talk about how you live on $174,000, because I find it fascinating." Documents then appeared on the screen. Property records, lease agreements, all public information. You lived with your mother in the Bronx when you ran for Congress. Rent, zero. Very frugal. Very of the people. But within months of being elected, you moved to a luxury apartment building in Navy Yard, Washington, D.C. Rent, approximately $3,000 per month. He scrolled through the documents. That's $36,000 a year just on rent, in one of the most expensive buildings in D.C. The building boasts a rooftop pool, a fitness center, a yoga studio, a pet spa, yes, a pet spa, and stunning views of the Capitol. Photos of the building flashed on screen. It looked expensive because it was expensive. "The median household income in your district," Patel continued, "is $52,000. You spend more than half of that just on rent for yourself. While representing people who are literally choosing between paying rent and buying food," AOC tried to defend, "I have to live in D.C. for my job." "In luxury housing?" Patel asked. "There are affordable apartments in D.C. There are house shares. There are options that don't cost $3,000 a month, but you chose luxury because you can afford it, because you're rich." He pulled up even more evidence, her Instagram account, which she had made public. "Your own social media accounts feature designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and frequent trips to events where tickets easily cost thousands of dollars. You're often seen attending galas, fundraisers, and exclusive parties. You openly socialize with celebrities and wealthy donors." One image after another popped up on the screen, showing AOC at various high-end events, always perfectly styled and always in lavish settings. Now, This isn't meant as a criticism of your personal lifestyle. Patel stated, "You earn a really good salary, and you absolutely should be able to enjoy it. But don't pretend you're not part of the elite when you're literally living in luxury housing and attending events that cost more than your constituents earn in months." He then set down the iPad. Now, let's shift gears and talk about campaign finance. You've built your entire brand on getting money out of politics and refusing corporate PAC donations, yet your campaign has accepted millions from individual wealthy donors and progressive PACs. Your most recent filing showed $5.2 million in contributions, with an average donation of $37, which sounds grassroots until you realize that's because a few thousand individuals gave the maximum $2,900, while millions gave absolutely nothing. He then pulled up the FEC filings. You've received money from tech millionaires, entertainment executives, and trust fund progressives. Essentially, all the very people you claim to oppose. You just prefer their money comes in individually, rather than through corporate PACs. It's the same money from the same source, carrying the same influence, just with a different label. AOC was once again gripping the arms of her chair. "Here's what really gets to me," Patel remarked. And for the very first time, there was something that sounded like genuine frustration in his voice. "You want to redistribute wealth, but just not your own wealth. You want everyone else to pay their fair share, yet you take advantage of every deduction. You want to tax the rich, but you yourself seem to enjoy being rich." He leaned in closer. "You're not a democratic socialist at all. Instead, you're a democratic socialist who enjoys capitalism for herself, while promising socialism for everyone else." He snorts. "That's not mere hypocrisy, that's outright fraud. You're selling a product, socialism, that you yourself refuse to actually use." He then sat back, spreading his hands wide. "If socialism is truly so great, then why aren't you actually living it? Why do you need a salary of $174,000 when your policies would redistribute wealth to everyone? Why luxury housing when you constantly advocate for affordable housing? Why a Tesla when you could easily take the subway? Why designer clothes when so many of your constituents shop at Goodwill?" The question just hung heavy in the air. "Led by example, Congresswoman, show us exactly how socialism works. Voluntarily redistribute your own personal wealth. Pay that 70% tax rate that you yourself want to impose. Live on the median income of your own district. Prove to us that your system actually works." Patel's voice was quiet now, yet it still carried significant weight. Or admit that socialism is really just for other people, that you simply want power to control how everyone else lives, while completely exempting yourself from those very same rules, because that isn't democratic socialism. That's simply authoritarianism with much better branding. AOC clearly had no answer. What could she possibly say in response? She wants wealth redistribution for everyone except for herself. A classic champagne socialist. Like and share if you truly see through this facade. Sarah Chen, realizing they only had 10 minutes left and sensing this might be the grand finale, decided to go for the Congresswoman's signature issue. "Let's talk about the Green New Deal," she began. "Congresswoman, this is truly your signature legislation. Can you tell us a bit about it?" Finally, AOC interrupted, clearly relieved to be on familiar ground. "Yes, thank you very much. The Green New Deal is all about saving our planet. It's about recognizing that climate change is an existential crisis that truly requires immediate and bold action. We simply can't afford to wait. We cannot compromise on this. We need—" "How much does it actually cost?" Patel abruptly asked. AOC visibly faltered. "What? Your Green New Deal, specifically the legislation you yourself introduced. How much will it actually cost to implement? Well, it's not truly about the cost. Everything, however, is absolutely about cost. Patel stated, legislation absolutely requires funding. How much? We can afford it if we simply prioritize it. AOC glanced at Sarah Chen, who unfortunately offered no help at all. The estimates, naturally, vary. AOC finally admitted it depends heavily on the implementation. $93 trillion, to be precise, Patel stated, holding up a document and an economic analysis from a prominent think tank. The American Action Forum estimates that your Green New Deal alone would cost $93 trillion over just 10 years. The lowest estimate I've personally found is $51 trillion. The highest, however, is well over $100 trillion. So let's just use that middle figure of $93 trillion. He then carefully set down the document. The current federal budget, for perspective, is roughly $6 trillion per year. Your plan, however, would require us to spend an additional $9.3 trillion every single year for an entire decade. That's effectively more than doubling the entire federal budget year after year for a full 10 years. AOC attempted to respond, we can simply be creative about how we manage to pay for it, but that's simply not a sufficient answer. Patel's voice clearly rose in frustration. That's exactly what my teenager says when she wants something expensive, but hasn't truly thought it through. We'll figure it out, Dad, she'd say. And that, Congresswoman, is absolutely not policy. That's just wishful thinking. The audience sat in stunned silence, completely captivated. You're the one who wrote this legislation, Patel continued. You personally brought it to Congress, and you've done countless interviews talking about it. So, how exactly do you plan to pay for it? Modern monetary theory suggests, AOC began. Oh, so now we're talking MMT. Patel looked genuinely disbelieving. That's the economic theory that claims governments can simply print money because they control the currency. This is a theory economists from across the political spectrum have rejected, yet you propose it as your funding mechanism. He then pulled out his iPad, displaying quotes from various economists. Paul Krugman, a liberal economist and Nobel Prize winner, famously called MMT Calvin Ball, a game with made-up rules. Larry Summers, who served as Treasury Secretary under Clinton, labeled it voodoo economics. Even liberal economists consider it nonsense, but that's what you're basing your plan on? AOC appeared defensive. We can tax. Hold on, let's do the math, Patel interjected. The combined wealth of all American billionaires totals approximately $4 trillion. Even if you seized every last penny they owned, literally leaving them with nothing, you'd collect $4 trillion. Considering your plan would cost $93 trillion, you'd run out of billionaires to rob within the first 6 months. He was truly in his stride now, years of frustration with progressive economic ideas pouring out. Let's break this down point by point. Your Green New Deal promises to, he said, ticking off items on his fingers, retrofit every single building in America for energy efficiency, a minimum of $6 trillion. Then, eliminate all fossil fuel use within a decade. That's virtually impossible, but if somehow attempted, it's another $15 trillion. And construct high-speed rail to replace air travel. That's physically unfeasible for intercontinental journeys, but sure, add another $5 trillion to the bill. Guarantee jobs for everyone. That's $44 trillion by your own estimates. Free college, $2 trillion. Universal health care, $32 trillion over 10 years. He looked directly at her. That alone adds up to $14 trillion. That's more than the entire U.S. economy. It's more than the GDP of the whole world combined. And you intend to accomplish all of it in just 10 years. AOC started to speak, but Patel wasn't finished. And we haven't even discussed what you'd obliterate. You really want to get rid of fossil fuels? That's 10 million jobs in oil and gas, plus another million in coal, and 2.5 million more across aviation, auto manufacturing, shipping, and logistics. You're essentially talking about completely overhauling our entire economy. He then displayed employment statistics. That's 13.5 million direct jobs you'd eliminate. Your plan claims it will create jobs, but it begins by destroying millions of them. So where do those people go? What do they do then? You still haven't provided an answer for that. The audience was now absolutely silent. And this, folks, is the real agenda, Patel declared, bringing up a quote on the screen. Your former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, made this statement back in 2019. The quote appeared, "The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. We actually see it as a way to fundamentally change the entire economy." Patel looked back at AOC. This isn't about the climate. It's about control. It's about using climate change fears to justify a complete government takeover of our economy. That's not environmentalism. That's authoritarianism, just painted green. He leaned back in his chair. You drafted a bill that would bankrupt America, eliminate millions of jobs, and give the government total control over every aspect of our economy. And when asked how you'd pay for it, your response is, "We'll be creative." That's not actual policy. That's pure fantasy. It's economic illiteracy, thinly disguised as environmental virtue signaling. He stared straight into the camera. This is what happens when someone who spent 4 years bartending believes they can redesign a $25 trillion economy. No disrespect to bartenders, of course. I've worked in service myself. But knowing how to mix a drink doesn't qualify you to restructure global capitalism. The audience erupted then, some applauding, others booing. A scene of total pandemonium. $93 trillion in spending with no clear payment plan. It's economics based on emoji comments and math, if you truly believe we need leaders who understand numbers. Sarah Chen, realizing they had run significantly over time, but recognizing this was prime television, decided to let the moment play out. "We have time for just one final question," she announced. A woman in the back, dressed in professional attire and sporting a Queen's accent, rose to her feet. "My question is for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez," she stated. "What exactly is your legislative accomplishment?" The audience fell silent again. This was the question everyone wanted answered. AOC adjusted in her chair, ready with a response. "I've introduced 33 bills addressing climate change, healthcare, and workers' rights." Introducing bills isn't the same as accomplishing something. Patel cut her off. "How many of those actually passed?" AOC hesitated. "The legislative process involves how many of your bills became law," Patel pressed further. "It takes time to build coalitions," she offered. "Zero," Patel declared. "The answer is zero. You've served in Congress for 3 years. You've introduced 33 bills. 0 have passed. 0 have become law. Your legislative accomplishment is quite literally nothing." He then brought up the congressional record on his iPad. "But let's actually talk about what you've achieved," he stated. "On Twitter, you have 13 million followers. On Instagram, that's 8.5 million followers. And on TikTok, it's 6 million. You truly are one of the most followed politicians across America. Quite impressive, indeed." He then carefully placed the iPad down. "You're not really a legislator. Instead, you're an influencer. just with a congressional salary. The audience collectively reacted with a mix of shock, recognition, and laughter, and a bit of anger, all blended together. AOC attempted to push back. "I'm building a movement," she insisted. "No," Patel stated, his voice firm. "You're actually building a brand. Your own brand, not a movement, not new laws, and certainly not solutions. It's all about a personal brand." He then brought up her website for everyone to see on the screen. There it was, AOC merchandise. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, phone cases, all available for purchase right on your website. Those Tax the Rich shirts were selling for $58. The irony would almost be amusing if it weren't so deeply cynical. You are literally making money from your official position. You've turned your congressional role into a cash cow, just like an Instagram sponsorship. The screen then filled with dozens of merchandise items, each proudly displaying her name, her slogans, and her image. You've essentially transformed Congress into a content creation machine, Patel declared. Now, every committee hearing becomes just another clip for TikTok. Every floor speech turns into a fundraising email. And every controversy, just another set of engagement metrics. For the very first time in the debate, he rose to his feet. "Let's quickly recap what we've firmly established tonight," he announced, his voice now sounding like a prosecutor delivering a powerful closing argument. "You publicly criticize billionaires, yet you enrich them with your own spending choices. You were seen at a $35,000 gala, ironically wearing a Tax the Rich dress. You used your own grandmother's suffering to score political points, then turned down actual help for her when it was offered. You caused the loss of 25,000 jobs simply because you seem to misunderstand basic economics. You champion socialism, all while personally enjoying the benefits of capitalism. You put forward legislation that would cost a staggering $93 trillion, with absolutely no clear plan on how to pay for it. And in your 3 years serving in Congress, you have not managed to pass a single law." He then moved closer to her chair, not in a threatening way, but with undeniable confidence. "So, here's my real question, Congresswoman. What exactly are you accomplishing?" AOC parted her lips to speak, but no words emerged. "You're not actually legislating," Patel pressed on. "You're not truly solving problems. You're not genuinely helping the people you represent. You're just tweeting. You're just trending. You're just going viral. You're only building a following. You're just selling merchandise. You're just creating content." He then spread his hands wide. "You're not really a member of Congress. You're a social media influencer who just happens to cast a vote, and the people who elected you truly deserve something better." A profound silence fell over the room. "America faces a clear choice," Patel declared, now looking directly into the camera, addressing the millions watching at home. "Do we want leaders who actively solve problems, or influencers who merely post about them? Do we want politicians who grasp economics, or activists who understand engagement algorithms? Do we want representatives who pass actual laws, or celebrities who just pass judgment?" He then turned his gaze back to AOC. "You are not the future of the Democratic Party. You are, in fact, a warning. A warning about what can happen when we choose people based on viral moments, rather than their genuine qualifications. When we value Twitter followers above legislative ability, when we confuse performance with actual governance." He returned to his chair and calmly sat back down. "Your voters elected you to represent them in Congress, to enact legislation, and to genuinely improve their lives. Instead, you've offered them Instagram posts and absolutely zero laws. Is that truly the representation they deserve?" AOC attempted to formulate a response, her voice noticeably shaky. "You're only attacking me because you're afraid of—" "I'm not afraid of you," Patel interjected quietly. "I am deeply disappointed on behalf of your constituents. They certainly deserve more than just an Instagram account that happens to come with a vote." The venue then erupted. It was a cacophony of applause, boos, shouting, and sheer chaos. Sarah Chen desperately tried to bring order back, but it proved to be utterly impossible. Patel remained seated calmly in his chair, having clearly made his point. AOC, meanwhile, sat in her seat, looking as though she wished to vanish. Every single moment was captured by the cameras. The video officially went live on social media at 9:47 p.m. Eastern. By 10 o'clock p.m., it was already trending on X, formerly Twitter, under the hashtag #ZeroLaws. By 11 p.m., clips of the debate had saturated TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts, all the very platforms AOC had once so thoroughly dominated. As midnight approached, conservative media outlets were playing it on a continuous loop. Fox News, Newsmax, and The Daily Wire were all featuring it. Every single right-leaning news source had declared it their top story. By 6 o'clock a.m. the following morning, even mainstream media outlets found it impossible to ignore. CNN reported on it with the headline, "Heated Town Hall Exchange." MSNBC attempted to frame it with "Context Needed, Fact-Checking Claims About AOC." However, the video truly required no additional context. Patel had come prepared with undeniable evidence for every single claim he made. Within just 48 hours, the debate had accumulated an astounding 68 million views across all social platforms. The phrase "Instagram account with a vote" quickly morphed into an instant meme. New merchandise, inspired by the event, began appearing within days. Conservatives sported shirts with the phrase, while progressives attempted to reclaim it ironically, yet failed. The #ZeroLaws hashtag then trended relentlessly for 3 consecutive days. Soon, people began applying that same hashtag to many other politicians. This senator had been serving in office for 12 long years. #laws. It quickly became a way to describe showy politics that lacked any real impact. AOC's reaction spoke volumes. She went on Twitter late that night, around 11:30 p.m., posting a defensive thread right after the debate. She claimed, "Tonight's ambush showed everything that's wrong with corporate media." She continued, "They cherry-picked facts completely out of context, all just to attack a woman of color who's fighting for working people. And this is exactly what they do when they get scared of our movement." However, the issue was straightforward. Patel hadn't actually cherry-picked anything. Instead, he'd used her very own tweets, her exact words, public records, and facts that were easy to verify. It was tough to argue out of context when the complete video was literally everywhere. Her close political allies, the Squad, immediately tried to come to her defense. Representative Ilhan Omar posted a tweet showing her support. Representative Rashida Tlaib called it a right-wing hit job, and Representative Ayanna Pressley wrote about what she saw as coordinated attacks on women of color serving in Congress. Yet, their defense seemed weak, overly defensive, and obviously scripted. Even some progressive voices quietly conceded that AOC wasn't ready, that she perhaps needed better answers, and that her strategy of leaning on viral moments instead of solid policy might finally be catching up with her. The political consequences hit instantly. In just 1 week, 3 different Democrats publicly announced they were thinking about challenging her in a primary election for her district. 2 of them were moderates, who had seemingly just been waiting for her to stumble. The third was a progressive, who felt she'd grown too obsessed with her celebrity status and not enough with her actual constituents. New polls in her district revealed her approval rating had plummeted 18 points in merely 10 days. Among independent voters, her disapproval rating shot up to 61%. Even with her own party, the Democrats, she saw her approval rating drop from 82% down to 68%. Democratic leadership, who had always viewed AOC and the squad with caution, now openly began to distance themselves from her. House Minority Leader Haki Jeff, when asked about the debate, gave a carefully worded statement: "Every member of our caucus brings different strengths. We encourage all our members to focus on substantive policy that helps working families." The unspoken message, "You're on your own, kid." AOC then lost her spot on the Financial Services Committee, supposedly because of a reorganization, but everyone understood it was really a punishment for embarrassing the party. She stopped making live television appearances. No more CNN, no more MSNBC, not even on the channels that were typically supportive. Instead, she retreated to her comfort zones, Instagram, TikTok, and podcasts where hosts wouldn't dare challenge her. Meanwhile, Kash Patel instantly became a hero to conservatives everywhere. His Twitter follower count exploded from 500,000 to 4.3 million in just 1 week. Conservative groups began reaching out, asking him to participate in more debates, more town halls, and more public appearances. Republican campaigns all over the country started featuring clips from the debate in their advertisements. The ads declared, "This is what happens when you vote for Instagram influencers instead of real leaders. Vote for experience. Vote Republican." His calm, fact-based, and thoroughly documented approach became the new standard. "Bring receipts" quickly became the rallying cry for the conservative movement. Other Republican officials soon started to mimic his style. They would prepare meticulously, cite very specific facts, avoid getting emotional, and just let the evidence speak for itself. The media's story about her completely changed. For years, AOC had been painted as a rising star, the Democratic Party's future, a truly formidable force. Now, articles began popping up with headlines questioning the limits of Twitter politics, wondering when viral moments aren't enough, and asking, can Instagram activism actually lead to legislative success? Even Saturday Night Live aired a sketch about the debate, showing AOC constantly trying to shift to her talking points. Meanwhile, Patel kept pulling out increasingly ridiculous props and documents. Surprisingly, the sketch was pretty even-handed, which said a lot, and its cultural impact stretched far beyond just politics. The term zero laws became a quick way to describe any action that was all for show, but produced no real results. If someone posted about their activism online, the comment sections would flood with zero laws. It turned into a method for calling out virtue signaling, demanding actual substance instead of just style. Even on college campuses, where AOC had once been celebrated, students began to question how effective she truly was. Student groups found themselves debating whether it was better to have representatives who actually passed laws or those who merely raised awareness. These discussions often became quite heated. The phrase "Instagram account with a vote" soon entered common political language. Pundits started using it. Journalists referenced it frequently. It defined a new category: politicians who were more skilled at social media than at governing. Just 3 weeks after the debate, AOC declared she would not seek re-election for any House leadership positions. She stated she'd stay in Congress, but would concentrate on serving my constituents directly rather than leadership roles. In typical Washington political speak, this basically meant, "I've been pushed aside, and now I'm just trying to save face." Her media presence, which had once been everywhere, significantly decreased. She still tweeted and posted, but her engagement numbers were noticeably lower. The viral moments started to dry up. Their influence, it was clearly on the decline. The debate had really laid bare a fundamental truth. You could build a whole brand on social media, sure, but legislative failures? Those couldn't be hidden forever. Eventually, someone was going to step up and ask, "So, what have you actually accomplished?" And if the answer was 0 laws passed, well, all the Instagram followers in the world weren't going to save them. Then Kash Patel arrived, and he brought the receipts. And those receipts, as it turned out, were far more powerful than any retweet.